What will happen to your body and mind if you don't sleep for 3 days? A person often limits their own sleep, thinking that they'll get more done, achieve more, and that everything will be fine. Both the body and the mind suffer from lack of sleep. And after just 1 day without sleep, you'll feel the consequences of not sleeping. In this video, you'll find out what will happen to your body and your mind after 1, 2, and 3 days without sleep. But if you're curious and want to know what will happen after 5, 6, or even 10 days, be sure to watch this video until the end. Unfortunately, our civilization contributes to the fact that we deprive ourselves of sleep, or some external circumstances prevent us from sleeping. In particular, 20% of people work in shifts, meaning, for example, a 24-hour shift where a person doesn't sleep for an entire day. Unfortunately, this already has a negative impact on both our mental health and our bodies. After a day, you start to get a headache, you feel tired, worn out, drowsy, and your attention, memory, and concentration decrease. Moreover, the so-called higher nervous functions, such as forecasting, decision-making, and understanding other people, also suffer. This is especially important for people who make important decisions, like businessmen or top managers, for example. Bill Clinton once said that the dumbest decisions he ever made were when he hadn't gotten enough sleep. So if you haven't slept for a day, just a little note, try not to make any life-changing decisions. It's quite possible that you'll make a mistake. Scientific studies show that if a person doesn't sleep for a day, the effect on the body is the same as if the person is moderately intoxicated. The blood alcohol concentration is approximately 1 per milliliter. Basically, just like a drunk person doesn't make good decisions, or so to speak, doesn't function well, a person who hasn't slept for a day functions just as poorly. And also, a day without sleep significantly negatively affects the immune system. There are studies that show that if a person gets vaccinated, for example, gets a flu shot, people who haven't slept for a day before that develop immunity much worse than those who have slept normally. So, in general, this is quite a serious problem even if you haven't slept for just 1 day. But I'm more than sure that there are some of you who haven't slept for a day or even longer. By the way, leave a like if you've ever had problems with lack of sleep. And by the number of likes, I'll understand that this is an important problem and that it needs to be evaluated and solved. After 48 hours without sleep, in addition to all these complaints, you will also develop severe daytime sleepiness. As a rule, a person can concentrate on any task or perform it consistently. And if a person doesn't sleep for 3 days, he becomes completely incapable of functioning. He can't perform any consistent work at all. He falls asleep. In the process of doing something, even while talking with a spoonful of soup, not to mention in front of a book or a computer, or behind the wheel of a car, you could say it practically makes a person unable to do any work. By the way, I once read about how Yugoslav partisans during World War II were running away from the Germans, or somehow hiding from the Germans. They had 3-day marches, and they would walk through the mountains in a line tied together with a rope. Well, sometimes I ask why. They say, well, you could fall there to support someone. No. The thing is, when they walked in a line, someone in the middle would stop and fall asleep standing up. The front part of the line would keep going and get lost, and all the people behind that person would also stop and fall asleep standing up. They didn't even realize what was happening. They saw a person standing in front of them, so that meant it was okay to stand and sleep while standing. And this was a big problem just to avoid getting lost during this crossing. That's what 3 days without sleep does to you. I'd like to point out that people have a false perception when they think they're not sleeping. So I'm talking about the reality of depriving a person of sleep. But sometimes patients come to me and say, Doctor, I haven't slept for 3 days, 6 days, 10 days, 15 days, a month. At the same time, the person is well groomed, the woman is wearing makeup, the man is managing someone. This is a false sense of insomnia, a phenomenon of sleep perception disorder that often occurs during chronic stressful situations and with insomnia. And I have a mini book that is dedicated specifically to stress and insomnia, where I describe these situations in detail and, most importantly, give clear recommendations on how to deal with this problem.
Have you ever had clients who really didn't sleep, not just felt like they weren't sleeping, but actually stayed awake and worked for 3 days straight?
It's interesting. I don't have clients. I have patients. People like that don't come to me. And do you know why? If someone hasn't slept for 3 days due to circumstances, they'll sleep very deeply afterwards. And after getting some sleep, of course, the person won't go to a sleep specialist to complain about insomnia. But when a person is lying there thinking they're not sleeping, but actually they are sleeping, he believes he has insomnia, unable to sleep at night and during the day, but in reality, he does sleep at night. With this feeling, he comes to me and says, "Doctor, it's terrible. I haven't slept for days, weeks, and months." And this is what I have to treat. True sleep deprivation usually doesn't cause insomnia. Instead, it leads to drowsiness and falling asleep very quickly. By the way, I treat such patients by not letting them lie in bed. This leads to real daytime drowsiness and much better sleep. If a person doesn't sleep for 4 to 6 days, hallucinations start to appear. That is, in reality, a person's sleep, their dreams, start to intrude into wakefulness. Part of the brain, like in dolphins, part of the brain sleeps while another part stays awake. So, part of the brain falls asleep and sees dreams, while another part stays awake and perceives the surroundings, and the dream is superimposed directly onto reality. In fact, these can be visual, auditory, or tactile hallucinations. So basically, it's a kind of hallucinogenic delirium. From an outside perspective, a person may appear insane, as they might discuss non-existent things. People, animals, and something else are shown here. So unfortunately, this is already a mentally ill person if he doesn't sleep for 4 to 6 days. And if a person doesn't sleep for 7 to 10 days, there are sporadic reports like that described. Actually, the longest documented period without sleep, the world record is only 11 days without sleep. So after about 7 days, a person can completely forget their own name, where they are, and be in a completely semi-conscious, delirious state. And at that point, serious internal organ dysfunction begins, and unfortunately, this can lead to a fatal outcome. In fact, it's well known that if any mammal is deprived of sleep, it will eventually die. And such sadistic experiments were conducted on rats, mice, and dogs. Thermoregulation is disrupted, immunity drops, organ function is impaired, leading to sepsis, ulcers, organ failure, and death. That's basically it. The same thing can eventually happen to a person if they are deprived of sleep. Please write in the comments, what is the longest you've ever gone without sleep and what consequences did it lead to? I read the comments and maybe I'll give some advice on this topic and maybe even debunk some myths. Because when someone says they haven't slept for a week but at the same time can't sleep during the day, that's just not possible. It means he's sleeping, but he thinks he's not.
And under what circumstances in general can a person in the modern world go without sleep for 4 days or 3?
Listen, well, once a special forces guy told me that they actually have training sessions like that when they spend 3 days doing all sorts of exercises. Yeah, like hikes, some activities, and so on and so on. And he told me that he's a tough guy. He really could stay awake longer than the others. And after those 3 days of activities, they put him on duty. He stands with his rifle, watching the Germans. He shouts, "No, stop!" They keep coming. He cocks his rifle and says, "Stop or I'll shoot." They keep coming. He fires into the air. They keep coming. He starts shooting at them. Then someone jumped on me from behind, tackling and knocking me down. He was actually just hallucinating. So he was dreaming while standing, but of course he was dreaming about Germans. Thankfully, his comrades jumped on him from behind as he was firing his machine gun aimlessly. That's what happens when a person goes 3 days without sleep. A young, healthy person. It's good that he was shooting at his own. Well, yes, it's good that it was in the other direction.